She's come to talk about outcomes that matter and designed to change behaviour. So put your hands together for Alberta Soranzo, please.
Hi. As Gavin was just now introducing me, as he did for everybody else, I had a realization. With the exception of very few speakers you'll see today here, everybody has the word design in the title. I don't know if that's a coincidence or if it's by design, but I thought it was great because everybody here is a designer. So when we do design, we design several things. We may be asked to work on projects that we believe in. We may be asked to work on projects that really don't make a whole lot of sense for us. But it's when you do things that have a large impact that I think we are mostly rewarded.
You know, at every stage of our lives, we make decisions that will profoundly influence the lives of the people we're going to become. And then when we become those people, we're not always thrilled with the decisions we made. So young people pay good money to get tattoos removed that teenagers paid good money to get. Middle-aged people rush to divorce people who young adults rushed to marry. Older adults work hard to lose what middle-aged adults worked hard to gain. On and on and on.
So this is Dan Gilbert. He wrote a really good book called The Psychology of Your Future Selves. And it made me think about, in the context of the work that we do, why as people, the people behind the design, why do we make decisions that our future selves regret so often? Jenny earlier said that she cringes a little bit when she looks at designs that she's done before. I don't think that she regrets them, but clearly, she would have made very different decisions. And so to explore this, I decided to talk to you, to take you through 3 stories. And I'm wondering if you can make, right off the bat, the connection between engagement rings, my gambling Uncle Joe, and people that live on minimum wage. It sounds a bit tough, right? So the diamond invention is a relatively recent one. I know from people, I don't have an engagement ring, but I know from people that get married or that are thinking about getting married that an engagement ring is a really big deal. How has it become to mean love, affection, esteem, and value? And why do we have to spend X amount of months of salary on an engagement ring? What is behind that? So the truth is that until last century, diamonds were found only in riverbeds. There weren't mines, there wasn't a big industry. And the production of gem diamonds was really a few pounds every year. It wasn't very big. However, in 1870, I think, huge diamond mines were discovered by the River Orange in South Africa, and diamonds soon flooded the market and were scooped out by the ton. So the Brits, always the Brits, you know, clever people that they were, they found themselves with a really big problem. There were all these things that were on the market that suddenly had absolutely no value. There were competing forces at stake, and they did the thing that we do when we think about being in a difficult situation. They got together and they figured that the solution was to create one big association or one big union that would essentially scope the diamond market. And so, and this is how in the late 1800s, the Beers Diamond Corporation was born. However, with so many stones on the market, there was the problem of making again them a precious commodity. And so the Beers, at the beginning of the 20th century, did what our clients do essentially. You know, they found an agency, they went to an agency, they said, we have a problem, and the problem is that we have all these stones and we don't know what to do, and that's our way to make money. So this woman is Frances Garrity. She is the woman who is single-handedly responsible for the fact that now you have to buy engagement rings. So blame her. It's really interesting because these were the 40s in America, but the agency, which was Ayers, set out to do user interviews. You see a pattern, right? And they found out that for American women, men should not be bothered with buying stones or engagement rings. What they wanted, they were coming out of the World War. What they wanted, they were cars. They were the electric kitchen that they saw, that they heard of on the radio. They wanted all these cool things. Diamonds were perceived as absolutely money down the drain. This is what the woman said. So the agencies, however, figured, you know, we can change that. That's what we do. And they set out on this mission to essentially creating a compulsion to pledge love and affection and love through a diamond ring. And this is the reason why today half of your Instagram feed, if not more, looks like this. I got a ring. Except when, you know, if you take this audience, 600 people, let's assume that everybody's getting married in the, you know, in the next year. It's 600 diamond rings. What happens afterward? The stones keep getting mined. And there was a really interesting thing that happened in the 80s when they found diamond mines in Russia. And the stones were really little compared to the ones that went on engagement rings. So the agencies had to go back and think how to market those. And how do you keep marketing? And so you might have seen, certainly if you were in the States, but I believe here in Europe too, things like this. You know, I'm going to show you a little video that talks about this new artificial need that was created. Once you've given that big ring, 600 rings I sold right here, right now, over the next year, when you have a kid, when you have an anniversary, what happens? Right? And then there is the push ring for when you have kids. There are the earrings, and on and on and on. The bottom line is that this campaign or series of campaigns changed not just sales in America, where it all started, but it changed things globally. So if you think about Asia, if you think about Japan, in Japan, marriage is traditionally arranged. It's a tea ceremony. The bride and the groom drink tea and off they go. They're married. The campaign was so successful that as of the 80s, over 60% of Japanese brides were demanding engagement rings with diamond. And at this point in time, Japan is the second largest importer of diamonds in the world, which is remarkable if you think that until, I think, the end of the 50s, import of stones was absolutely forbidden. So, as you can see, cleverly designed campaigns really do change behavior of people. But I promised you that I would talk to you about my Uncle Joe. Except I don't have an Uncle Joe, but I have people in my family that have been touched by addiction, and especially gambling addiction. What is an addiction? An addiction is essentially an uncontrollable desire that needs to be satiated, and it doesn't really matter at which cost. Addicts go through really great lengths, and they go through massively self-destructive behavior just in order to pursue their urges. So my Uncle Joe eventually got over his gambling addiction, and part of what happened to him was that he was sent to a treatment facility like this. And in these facilities, things that happen are various. There are all these methodologies. There is detox, there is abstinence, support, coaching, replacement, therapy, you name it, they do it. All these methodologies fall under the behavioral modification label. And behavioral modification is an approach that's based on principles that are called of operant conditioning, but essentially it's aimed at the replacement of undesirable behaviors with more desirable ones. Who the behavior is desirable for is debatable. In the case of diamonds, clearly the behavior was desirable for the mining industry. But in the case of someone who is struggling with serious problems, clearly it's to their advantage. So I'm not the first one to think about behavioral modification. In fact, I am not a behavioral modification scientist. But I'm really interested in how behavioral modification or behavioral design applies to the work that we do. So Nir Eyal, who I'm sure a lot of you are famous with, published this behavior change matrix, which I think is really interesting. And this is where I get to use my fancy laser pointer. So he essentially identifies these 4 quadrants. Changes that require low self-control, changes that require high self-control, do type of change, so create automatic responses, and don't type of changes which break automatic responses. And we can see that addictive behavior is a behavior that aims to break a certain cycle, but that requires a really high self-control. The tragedy behind this, and it's also a lesson, is that our neural system is aimed at making us pursue what we think will make us happy. But we don't really experience satisfaction. So my uncle, he was gambling, and losing, thinking about what he would achieve. But he was never satisfied. It's a completely losing game. So the thing is that, like there are so many methodologies and so many people that look at this, everybody wants to mess with our head for the most different reasons. But at the heart of everything is this aim to change people's habits so that the behavior that we want to influence becomes permanent. In the case of the diamonds, everybody's buying diamond rings. In the case of my Uncle Joe, actually, he eventually found a new activity. He doesn't gamble anymore. He sculpts. He does topiary, right? Really cool topiary. That's not my Uncle Joe, by the way, in the corner. So the thing that we take away is that we are in transition. We're subject to change. So we think that we are in a certain way, but if you ask people to think ahead and to think about what they're going to be in 10 years, they're going to imagine themselves just like they are right now. But if you ask people, are you what you think or who you think you were 10 years ago, we're all going to say no. The one constant in our life is change. So what happens, though, when you think that your circumstances cannot change, when you're trapped in a minimum wage job, for instance? We read about poverty quite a bit, and we all know people that live in council estates or even in those week-by-week motels. We know people that have to rely on food programs and that have to work 2-3 jobs to support their families. How do they get ahead? How can they change their circumstances when it's such a self-perpetuating situation? What happens when, for instance, you have an emergency and you need to buy furniture because you don't have a place to sleep? This family here, they were featured in the Washington Post just this week. They have various issues, minimum wage, they rely on programs. They needed to furnish their double wide trailer. Double wide is really important in America. It's a step up from trailer. And they went to one of those rent-to-own stores. So that couch that the gentleman is sitting on costs $1,500. Once he's done paying off the couch will have cost him $4,100, meaning almost twice as much the cost. And the thing is that when you go to these places, they hook you in by saying, oh, it's only $10 a week or 10 pounds a week. And then you see that other thing, and that other thing is only 10 pounds a week. And it adds up, and you get stuck into the cycle. And then you have an emergency, and what do you do when you have an emergency? You need to borrow money, right? And so you go to Cashflex. Cashflex lends you money, and it's really low repayments. But if you look at the fine print, when you borrow £2,000 and you pay £158 per month, if you can, because you don't always can, in the end, you have, for 2 years, with an interest rate of 71.3%, the charge for the credit is £1,800. The total amount payable from 2,000 is $3,800, and the APR, the annual percentage rate, is 99%. But then it says very helpfully, late repayment can cause you serious money problems, as if I didn't have money problems when I got myself here, right? How do you get ahead? The problem is that we need to learn to think about our future you. We need to think about the person. We need to learn to think in terms of the person that we're going to be in 30 years. But if the person that we're going to be in 30 years is invariably different, how are we going to recognize that person as future us? Can we trust that person? How can we be motivated to make sacrifices for that person that we don't know? Because you see, in trust, there is an inherent element of risk. And this is the situation that we were facing. We talked, before they talked about doing your homework before you launch yourself into a product. When a client, actually a couple of clients this year came to us and said, make me a product. And this was a product that was, it was a product that was for people who don't necessarily have much money, who needed to change their behaviors so that they could meet their goals. Now, it was they were financial products for low-income people that may be trapped in minimum wage jobs that cannot get ahead financially. And so we said, oh, cool, that's easy. There's a ton of stuff like that. There's Nutmeg, there's Betterment, et cetera, et cetera. Except when we showed it to people, when we went out to do our research, the reactions we got were, I'm not the data type. It looks that I would need to be overly educated, and I'm really a waitress in a diner. It makes me feel small. I don't have that kind of money. I don't go, what is even a wealth and asset management company? But beneath those reactions, what these people were really afraid of were things like this. Not being able to understanding. We talked about risk. If I have to put my entire, all the little money I have into a situation where I could potentially lose it, that's a huge risk for me. How does it work? I don't have a bank account. How do I put money in? How does it grow? Investing is gambling. No, I am going to put money under the mattress, but you're not taking my money because I have so little. I will lose it all. How am I going to feed my kids? And by the way, Only pros can invest. And what happens if I have an emergency? Is my money going to be locked away? No, this isn't for me. This is just for rich people. This is what people like you, people like me, this is what my husband would say. Oh, no, I can't be bothered. I don't understand. Of course, he could understand if he wanted to. Everybody could understand. But there is this barrier, there is fear, there is this sense that these things are for other people, not for us. So how can we help people that work? There is a really interesting mechanism that comes into play, right? The it's good enough. I don't know how many people have heard about the concept of satisficing. The concept of satisficing is essentially getting, when something is satisfactory and sufficient, why should I take this long and winding road up the hill? Why should I be working on unknown, on boring, on unproven, when there is something that's good enough? If I put it under the mattress, I know that my money is going to be there and nobody's going to touch it, and yes, nothing is going to happen to it. It's not going to grow, but it's not also going to lose. So in our research, we identified essentially 12 global issues. Some are really difficult to address, like awareness of these things, emotion, personal values, like I want to invest only in things that speak to me ethically. Some are around that are high in severity of the challenge, but really low as an effort to address, are the issues of trust. We can communicate. We can make people, we can be transparent and help people feel safe. And some are both really important and really hard. And they're all about changing the behavior of people. How can we teach people to become familiar with these concepts of wealth, asset management, investment? How can we make these processes efficient? And that's where, in our role of designers, we become a bit like superheroes. We put on our superhero capes and we started thinking about these products as, products for humans, where we can speak the same language of the people whose behaviors we want to affect, like therapists in a rehab facility, where we can reassure people that their money isn't going to go away, where we can educate so that the behavior is not going to be just learned behavior for the people that use the product, but it's going to pass down in oral history to their kids, so that we can break effectively that cycle of behavior that's undesirable, both for humans in their own individuality and for communities at large. And so the products that we have designed look a bit like this. We talk to people language. We use, we talk about wealth, and we talk about future selves in terms that people can understand. For some people who don't make a whole lot of money, buying a new couch can be and is the priority. They are concerned about security, because security is massively important together with risk. And we're looking at the platform that these people use. If you think someone who has very low income, they probably cannot afford a desktop computer, a laptop, a tablet, a phone. They will have the highest end smartphone that they can afford, because that replaces the TV, YouTube. You can do everything. You can get entertained, you can get educated, you can communicate, you can perform transactions. So we've tried to address all those needs so that their behavior could be different. Clearly, as you know, the financial industry being what it is, I can't show you any of these things until they come out. Even the friendier is not going to work in these circumstances. And then again, you know that there are 2 rules for success, right? So what tools did we use? Because we don't do all these things by magic. We do research, we do all sorts of things. We talk to the clients, but we did not really have a formalized strategy to make sure that our behavioral design efforts really panned out. We didn't have it structured. And we looked around, and I stumbled onto something that's fantastic. It's a fantastic toolkit that I actually have brought here with me. And so I think Barry and Northern UX crowd is going to help me find a lucky recipient that gets the whole set of behavior changes strategy cards, which are right here. So essentially, this is a deck of 23 cards. You don't have to use them all at the same time. You can print them out. It's public domain. They were developed by this group called Artifacts, and they help us break down behaviors into steps that can be addressed individually. So the 5 themes are, make it personal. What is it in me that is going to make me connect with my future self? Why would I be motivated to make changes that are relevant to me personally? Tip the scales. Do things differently. Don't think in the same. Don't think in the same way. Change the perception of gains and losses. Yes, I'm going to go through withdrawal if I stop drinking now, but in 2 years' time, I can run around with my kids, or I can get back on a plane because I have completed my sobriety test. Craft a journey. Don't think tactically. Take a look at the overall ecosystem in which the product you're designing it has to exist. Don't design something for regular people that only work on a desktop computer when you know that low-income people don't have that. Set up options. Create, we humans are imperfect. We take 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, and then we go to the wayside. Set the stage so that people can be successful. And then keep it simple. On the internet, in the last 3 months, I think all I read about, or most of what I read about, is about the paradox of choice. When you are looking for a new direction, you are looking for clear options. Give 1, 2 choices, but keep it as simple as possible. In conclusion, I really, really, like to invite everybody to reflect about what, again, Nirayal has to say about responsibility. What responsibility do we have to change when we change users' behavior? We need to be careful. We need to put the same care and attention that we put into creating other types of outcomes into behavioral modification or behavioral design. I mean, the effects of an ad campaign are global. The effect of what you do today could impact lives for the better, hopefully, at a scale that you cannot imagine. So you have to put really a lot of thoughts in the things that you do. Because as someone else said, with great power comes great responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a question, and it's quite a deep, deep, deep question.
Oh, God. What makes you think I can answer that?
Timothy West spoke at Industry a couple of years back on a similar subject, and I asked a similar question to Timothy that I'm going to ask you. A lot of companies want to mess with your heads for their reasons. Have you ever thought of a world where we only do good as an industry and as a community, and what that looks like by fixing things like homelessness and low income?
Wow, there are a few questions in there. I think, I think ideally, there's ideal and there's real, right? So first of all, the concept of good is always relative, you know, to one's own priorities. So there is global good, there is individual good, there is corporate good. I find that in an ideal world, you would be pursuing a positive outcome, period. But there are shades. So if you think, for instance, about the gambling industry, their good is, well, you know, it's making money, et cetera, et cetera. So I actually, before I took my current job, speaking of the gambling industry, I was offered a role at a gambling company. And it was from the point of view of my personal goods, oh my God, the package was amazing. They were relocating me to a place where the sun always shines, fancy title, in thinking even about my future self, right? Hey, that goes on my CV. The next step can be fantastic. Idea, Google, you know, you name it. I can write my own ticket. The thing is, their good wasn't aligned with my good. And I decided not to take the job. Right. So ethics come into play in the definition of good. But in terms of what you described as designing to solve problems, ideally that's all, you know, I think most of us would do all the time. And there are fantastic initiatives. Speaking of, here in Manchester, I don't know if you guys know, the owners of Man United have bought a property to turn it into a luxury hotel. And they have actually, they're in the, there's renovation undergoing. They have decided to open the hotel during the winter to homeless people to, so that they will avoid the colder months. I don't recall the name of the two owners that decided to do this, but huge shout to Manchester for this. It's fantastic. So the thing is, when you design for global good, you have to be really, really careful. And it's the same thing that I tell the designers on my team. I said it's important to think, you know, holistically about ecosystems. But when you design intervention programs or when you design for behavioral modification, it's fairly impossible from the onset to see everything, to see all the facets. So there is a really high chance that while designing to reduce homelessness, we may be impacting other factors that we cannot foresee. And so in that context, I think what makes sense is to focus perhaps on some more tactical activities that are local and that are actionable, and count on those examples of success as your design strategy for propagating, you know, the positive outcome you want to achieve. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. This year at Industry, I closed the conference basically talking about this kind of thing and the fact that designers hold quite a lot of power to fix things that need to be good rather than bad. So it's a bit of a kick up the ass to anybody that's thinking about doing it to actually do it and move on from that and then talk about how you have done it, basically. So yeah, just a quick story on the back of that as well with regards to the gambling thing. There was an example of, from a health point of view, to do with design. There was a place in Norway where they basically built a village and housed lots of people with dementia and Alzheimer's within this village. Not because they didn't know where else to put them, but because this village had a post office and a shop and everything else. But with the people that had Alzheimer's and dementia didn't have a clue that the people within the village that worked in these shops were actually full-time carers. So the lifespan of anybody with Alzheimer's and dementia actually extended because they thought they would live in a fulfilled life rather than being housed in a home or elsewhere where they kind of just closed down and died like 5 to 10 years early. So they thought they were living the life of Riley, but everybody else was around them caring for them. So there is a designed solution to a health problem.
Right, and they're doing these types of initiatives socially more and more. So there is a shortage of housing for students. In the Netherlands, they've opened nursing homes to students who can live there rent-free in exchange for a few hours of companionship, not even professional care, for these elderly people. You know, and that too is a design solution to not one but two problems.
So, well, thank you very much, Alberta.
Thank
you
you.
very much. Cheers.